On June 29, 1972, Pope Paul VI spoke of God's enemy supreme, that enemy of man called Satan, enemy of the Church. The smoke of Satan, warned Paul VI, has found its way into the Church through the fissures. It was an anguished warning that caused great shock and scandal, even within the Catholic world. Vatican's chief exorcist, Father Gabriele Amorth. When the tears of the Virgin Mary met the smoke of Satan. The incredible story of weeping statues in a suburb of Washington, D.C., written by Stephen Ryan. The mystery. For years, many close to the Catholic Church had speculated on how an evil, the smoke of Satan, would manifest itself inside the Catholic Church, inside certain chanceries, and then on a hot summer day in August, a clue. On August 11, 1992, the longtime Chancellor to the Diocese of Arlington in Virginia, 53-year-old Monsignor William Reinecker, walked into a nondescript cornfield in Berryville, Virginia, near the Holy Cross Trappist Monastery with a loaded shotgun and killed himself. His death would leave behind a long shadow of untold secrets, secrets of both good and evil, secrets whose scope, nearly 30 years later, are only now beginning to be fully understood. During an implausible 6 months in 1992, Monsignor William Reinecker would quite literally come face to face with both the divine and the damned. Before the Chancellor's suicide, 5 months earlier, on March 6, 1992, a local television affiliate of CBS News aired a story initially without much fanfare about mysterious occurrences of weeping statues of the Blessed Virgin Mary taking place in Lake Ridge, Virginia, a quiet suburb 20 miles south of the nation's capital. The extraordinary events were mostly occurring at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Catholic Church and its rectory. The reported occurrences of weeping Madonnas were associated with a local priest named Father Jim Bruce. The statues seemed to tear in his presence. Astonishingly, Father Bruce was also experiencing the wounds of Christ, known as the stigmata, an extremely rare mystical phenomena. Within days of the CBS television news report, the story of the weeping statues and the priest experiencing the stigmata would become a worldwide media sensation. The Washington Post and dozens of other national and international news organizations descended onto the community to report and investigate the miraculous occurrences. To this day, the spontaneous media frenzy that engulfed the unexplained events stands as a singular moment in television history in the coverage of the mystical religious phenomena known as weeping statues. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of credible witnesses who saw the Virgin Mary statues weep. Witnesses included a Harvard-educated lawyer, numerous priests, military officers and government employees. Most significantly, the Bishop of the Arlington Diocese, John R. Keating, along with Monsignor William Reinecker, both witnessed the weeping Madonnas in the bishop's office. In the book The Seton Merkles, Jim Carney, an eyewitness to the events, writes, on March 2, 1992, Father Hamilton, the pastor to the St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Catholic Church, and Father Bruce met with Bishop Keating at the Chancery along with Monsignor William Reinecker. Father Bruce and Father Hamilton brought with them Madonna statues. Bishop Keating had 2 in his office and Monsignor Reinecker brought one of his own. All the statues wept. Reportedly, this convinced Bishop Keating that the weeping miracles is a genuine phenomenon and should be so treated. But as quickly as the story gained worldwide fame, the Arlington Diocese suddenly became concerned about the circus atmosphere that was engulfing the diocese, and the bishop quickly took decisive action. The Chancery's office, headed by Monsignor Reinecker, with the blessing of the bishop, coldly shut everything down. The statues of the Madonna, mind you, continued to weep, at times profusely, but as far as the Diocese of Arlington and the Catholic Church were concerned, the matter was officially over. The Chancery stated its position regarding the miraculous events in a formal declaration by the pastor Father Hamilton. In a nutshell, the declaration said that since there was no overt divine message being delivered, there was nothing to investigate, and the parish and the clergy from that point forward were forbidden to talk about the events. This decision, to many parishioners, was not only profoundly sad but seemed to be an odd determination, since only physical phenomena can be investigated. Reports of apparitions and locutions cannot be investigated. They can merely be assessed as to whether they are consistent with Catholic faith and morals. After this fateful decision by the Church, what came next was the smoke of Satan. Within months of dismissing the tears of Our Lady and silencing the talk of the miraculous events, Monsignor William Reinecker would again make newspaper headlines, this time by committing suicide in the cornfield by the monastery. After the suicide, shocked priests, parishioners, and friends searched for answers. Many blamed themselves for failing to see Monsignor Reinecker's quiet despair. But soon after the suicide, a startling report surfaced in the Washington Post. Joe McDonald, a former altar boy from another parish, claimed that Father Reinecker sexually molested him 25 years ago and said he had confronted the priest about the incident 2 days before Reinecker killed himself. Mr. McDonald urged William Reinecker to resign and get help. It is worth noting that Joe MacDonald was initially rebuffed by the diocese to talk about his experience with Father Reinecker, and it was only after the diocese's stonewalling did Mr. MacDonald reach out to the Washington Post. According to the Washington Post, Bishop John R. Keating, after reading the story in the newspaper, sought out Mr. MacDonald to discuss the matter. In the meeting with the bishop's representatives, he asked the diocese to establish support groups for victims and priests, but Mr. MacDonald was again disappointed with the diocese after concluding that no concrete proposals came out of his meeting. Mr. MacDonald was also upset that he was asked to stop speaking out, and that he should remain silent with his story. Within days of the Washington Post article, another man came forward and spoke about being molested by Father Reinecker. As the diocese reeled from the abuse allegations, a new bombshell. The Washington Post reported that William Reinecker was the person in charge of investigating claims of sexual abuse for the Arlington Diocese. Of course, nobody on the tragic day would hear the gun go off that killed Monsignor Reinecker. But now, looking back on the events of 1992, as Our Lady was weeping like never before in history, perhaps the gunshot was the shot heard round the world, because within months of the accused pedophile's suicide, the man in charge of pedophilia investigations for the diocese, the Catholic Church's sexual abuse crises would begin to unfold and become a worldwide story. In the 2004 John Jay Report on Sexual Abuse, commissioned by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, stated that prior to 1993, only 1/3 of sex abuse cases were known to church officials. The sex abuse catastrophe, as we now know, has become the single greatest challenge to the hearts, minds, and souls of the Catholic faithful. Many people have left the faith because of it. And to this day the Vatican continues to endure the ramifications of what Pope Benedict XVI has described as a wretchedness inside the Church. The smoke of Satan had indeed entered the Church, and the Blessed Virgin Mary wept for the loss of so many souls. The aftermath. Bishop Keating and Father Reinecker's decision to ignore the miraculous events of the weeping statues continues to be an unsolved mystery, and to many a very unfortunate one. The decision to ignore the events did not leave a neutral opinion in its wake. It left a negative implication. Some even believe the events have been condemned by the Diocese of Arlington. The bishop's apparent disinterest suggested that he must know something negative about the cause of the phenomena. The tragedy of this situation is that the bishop, then Most Reverend John R. Keating and now Most Reverend Paul Loverty, have refused to even acknowledge the events, much less investigate them to determine whether they constitute a true sign from God that the faithful could consider as miraculous. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect to all of this is that the point man in charge of silencing talk of the Seton miracles, a man who was also overseeing investigations into claims of sexual abuse by clergy, may well have been a pedophile. Indeed, it is never too late to investigate the miraculous, and, to be sure, prominent people still seek answers and guidance from the Diocese of Arlington. Citing the weeping statues and miracles that took place in the outskirts of Washington, D.C., Justice Scalia argued that it isn't irrational to accept the testimony of eyewitnesses to miracles. What is irrational is to reject a priori, with no investigation, which is, of course, precisely what the worldly wise do. Why wasn't the Church absolutely packed with non-believers? The answer was obvious, he said with disdain: the wise do not investigate such silliness. The words of Supreme Court Justice leaves us asking, why indeed was the Church not packed with officials of the diocese to investigate the weeping statues that haunted Justice Scalia? If an honest investigation determines that there were natural causes for all of the strange things that happened around Father Bruce, in Lake Ridge, Virginia, then that would be great. The matter could be put to rest. But we don't believe that will be the outcome of a transparent investigation. We don't see how such a conclusion would be possible. But that's the purpose of investigating. We think it is time for the Arlington Diocese of Virginia to reopen the investigation into the most sensational case of weeping statues in modern times.